it just started to kind of snowball on from there. Like I would get up in the morning before lectures, go to the gym, and then it would be in the evening as well. But then in between, wouldn't be resting. I wouldn't be fueling or adequately or eating adequately. There are times, even now, like when I will feel hungry, and there will be a like kind of an odd satisfaction about that, and I really have to check myself and catch myself and be like, no, Micheál, this is your body's signal that you need food. I wasn't prepared to admit it to myself or to sort of to deal with it, because it was also all I had. I remember that I was literally so scared that like, who would I be if I didn't have this? Like, it became my identity. I literally didn't know myself without the eating disorder.
Hello, and welcome back to the Toughest Finish Line podcast with me, Jen Dome. The podcast that shares the stories of resilience through sport and the challenges that shape us along the way. Today's guest is Micheál Costello, and his story is a powerful reminder that strength isn't always measured by finish times. Micheál's journey took him through the difficult realities of an eating disorder and exercise addiction that led him through an incredibly challenging time. Micheál opens up about the physical and mental toll of that period, the challenges of rebuilding a healthier relationship with exercise, and the lessons he learnt along the way. What makes Micheál's story even more remarkable is where that journey led. Through recovery, self-awareness, and a renewed perspective on sport, he went on to represent Ireland as a triathlete, proving that success is at its most meaningful when it's built on a foundation of health and balance. This is a conversation about identity, recovery, performance, and discovering that sometimes the toughest finish lines aren't found on the racecourse at all. So welcome to the show, Micheál Costello. Micheál, thank you so much for being here today. And we're going to talk about a range of quite challenging topics with you, as well as some epic sporting topics as well. But I wanted to just go right back to the beginning, if that's okay, because when I was researching about your story, it seemed like there was a lot in the early days that has impacted on your story and where you've got to today, which I think would be really helpful to share. So can you take us back to your childhood? You know, what was life like growing up for you? Because it wasn't always easy, was it?
No, and thanks for having me on, Jen. But yeah, growing up, to be honest, I did have a lovely childhood, but sports wise, it was a bit of a sticky point with my upbringing. So I grew up in rural Ireland in a place called Kerry, down in the southwest, which is a beautiful place to be raised in. But it's very sports heavy, but it's more the traditional Irish GA sports, which
Okay.
are Gaelic football and hurling. And they're quite like contact heavy. Um, like hurling is very much like, you have to wear a helmet, and it's pucking balls. It's basically like hockey, but you can pick up the puck, so it can be quite intense. And that was just not me really as a child, and it's still not me now. Like
Mm.
I wouldn't be into it that much. Um, but it was kind of expected of most boys, especially.
Mm.
Um, that you would be into it. And I just simply wasn't. But there was also kind of, I suppose, an extra layer so my mom was actually really um has a really sort of bright sporting history, and she was on the Irish or the Kerry ladies football team, which
Right.
a Gaelic football team, which is a big deal
Yeah.
um in our kind of little Irish bubble. But again, it's just that sort of growing up, then it was expected that, well, if your mom is is in it, then of course you're going to have to get into it and you're going to be good at it, which I was not. Like I think there's a story of me at one point, of like we were playing a match and I was just like, I was probably 7 or 8 and I was literally like picking daisies on the pitch, like doing cartwheels. No, I was just not, not that type of boy. Yeah. And, we were always active. It was just, I just wasn't very, I didn't, I suppose, have that competitive streak. I actually used to find having to compete um, in football and hurling anyway, quite like extremely nerve-wracking.
Mm,
I really did not like it. So yeah, I just kind of then ended up growing up thinking sport wasn't really for me because I didn't really have much more of an outlet or an outlook on what other sports there are, which sounds a bit bizarre when you think about it, but I suppose, it's like that thing of if you can't see it, you can't be it, especially from a child's perspective. And yeah, and then I kind of just threw myself into school more so than sport. Um, yeah, and yeah, so I did kind of enter my adolescence and teenage years thinking that, yeah, I'm not, sport isn't for me. And then as well as I kind of started to recognize my sexuality more, there was a bit more, kind of, it's not really that, like, again, there's this sort of narrative that I think is kind of falling away now, but there is definitely a narrative that, like, if you're like gay or whatever, that like you're not really into that kind of like sport, you're not like sporty, you're not active, which isn't the case at all.
no, no, absolutely not. And you are, from where your journey has led you to, you're proof of that for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, that must have been quite a pressure when your mum is quite successful in that sporting world and you're thinking it's just not for you. How did you manage that? Did it affect you, or were you able to kind of just ignore it and go, well, no, that's not me?
Um, no, I don't think I wasn't the kind of child to be like, no, that's just not, I wasn't that,
Mm,
kind of easygoing or happy-go-lucky, unfortunately. But I think I just felt a bit sort of, um, there was definitely feelings of kind of inadequacy there, or like guilt or
mm,
shame that I should be good at this thing. Um, and there's also then that, underlying, well, all the other boys are good at it and I'm not. And you to be honest with you, I used to feel a lot of pressure from other parents rather than, some people would have thought that, I've spoken to people before and they would have, encountered maybe bullying at primary school or something like that if they weren't good at sports. I was actually never, I got on with everyone in my class. Like I never had any issues like that with people my own age, including the boys. It was more so from parents that they were. I almost like used to get this sense of frustration from them, of like that pressure on the pitch and being shouted at,
yeah.
um, which I found quite tough. And I know that is kind of again something that's slipping away today. That it's more considered, which I'm glad to hear, because it does put a lot of pressure on on like an 8 or 9 year old. Um, so yeah, I felt a little bit inadequate, I think, growing up, which is why then I did throw myself a bit more into the academic
Hmm.
side of life, which was, I mean, I don't have I don't have any regrets, or like I don't look back and think I lost out on anything necessarily. It was just that was kind of the form that my childhood took, because
Yeah.
overall, like I said, I did still have a very happy,
Yeah.
privileged childhood. Like my parents did their best for me and everything like that.
Of
And
course.
I don't think today I would have been able to do what I did if I didn't have. I definitely got something from my mom. Maybe not her football and hurling or football skills, but I definitely got like some sort of competitive edge from her, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it is so much about how children are watching all the time what adults around them are doing. So even though at the time
100%.
sport wasn't your thing, it's definitely, as you say, it's probably had an impact later in terms of what you've gone on to do.
Yeah.
And so you threw yourself into academia, that was your world. But you've spoken quite openly that that going to the gym and exercise became a big part of your life. How did you get into that when sport wasn't for you?
Yeah, good question. I think it was just sort of, that usual thing of, like, 17, 18-year-old, like, you start to kind of discover the gym. Um, Because I did do like I said earlier, I was kind of always active. I
Hmm.
was I wouldn't have called myself a sporty child by any stretch, but I was definitely an active child, and that was always promoted as well in our house and just where we grew up as well in the countryside. It was very easy. It was just sort of second nature to be out and about and running around and things. So, and I think then when you kind of approach that age of like 17, 18, um, you don't really go out running around fields anymore or anything like that. So there needs to be another outlet. And, all my friends were starting to go to the gym. It just seemed like, I suppose it was just felt like a natural thing to do. Um, and yeah, and then I just ended up getting quite into it. I think it was, and I think this happens to a lot of boys or young men actually. It's because at that age, I think you start to see the effects of going to the gym very
Hmm.
quickly because your body is already in that state. Like, I'm not a scientist by any means, but your body is already in that state of like building muscles, like,
Yeah.
and things like that. So that can be experiencing that and like seeing it and then getting the positive feedback, I suppose, from society around you, like people saying, "Oh, you look great," blah blah blah. Um, it can become a very addictive, I don't know, like, a pastime or
Yeah.
whatever. And yeah, so I'd say that's kind of what happened. Like, I started to get that positive reinforcement, I think, from going to the gym, and which, at the beginning, and if it's sort of a bit more controlled and um things like that, I do think it can be a positive. But I suppose people need to be careful about who they say it to, or like, yeah, because it can have like it can lead to more negative effects.
Yeah, yeah, and I wanted to speak about that because you've spoken quite openly about your relationship with exercise and how it shifted from being quite healthy to quite obsessive. Are you happy to talk us through what that looked like and how you started to notice that maybe this wasn't so healthy?
Yeah. Um and when I do, I sometimes I find when I do talk about this, it sounds like it happened over the course of like a few weeks or something like that, and it actually didn't. So we'd say it, what I was just speaking about going to the gym and everything, that was, 17, 18, kind of finishing up secondary school, that
Right.
transition between secondary school and university. And then, yeah, I got into university, and I I continued going to the gym. And the first year of university, it was great. It was like the typical student uni experience of going out drinking and
Yeah.
things like that. But I also did continue going to the gym quite consistently, and I didn't really experience any sort of any kind of like negative effects from it then. It was more so in my second year of university, kind of around when I was 20, 21. I just I firstly, I started to phase out alcohol, and I kind of stopped going out, separated myself from my friends. This is all in hindsight as well. I wasn't conscious. Well, I wasn't consciously doing this at the
Yeah.
time. And yeah, it just started to kind of snowball on from there. Like, I would get up in the morning before lectures, go to the gym, and then if I like, I would spend a few hours there in the morning, and then it would be in the evening as well. But then in between, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't be resting. I wouldn't be, fueling or adequately or eating adequately. It would be, and then what I started to find was there was that kind of pairing of that hunger feeling. I actually kind of started to feel a sense of pride or something, and it was a great way to feel like I had control over something.
Mm,
Um, and I suppose when I made that connection in my head, it was kind of game over in the sense that, like, because I was being unchecked, this was just allowed to escalate and escalate. Um, and Yeah, it just started to get worse and worse, and then, it would be sort of like I began starting kind of like intermittent fasting, and, I would go to the gym in the morning, maybe eat breakfast afterwards, and then eventually that would be, "Okay, no, now I'm just going to skip breakfast and have lunch," and then it would end up being like a lighter lunch and a lighter lunch, and yeah, like, these things would kind of go on and on. And like I said, I did find that I used to eat, and this even exists to today, and it sort of touches on, like how, like an eating disorder is something you learn to manage. You don't really get over.
mm,
There are times, even now, like when I will feel hungry, and there will be a like kind of an odd satisfaction about that, and I really have
mm.
to check myself and catch myself and be like, no, Neil, this is your body's signal that you need food. Like, this isn't something that the longer you stick with, the more of an achievement it is.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it can it does very much sort of, I find it amazing how like it's such a mental illness, but it manifests itself so physically. Um, yeah.
Yeah, well, that was going to be one of my questions because obviously, so you've mentioned about how you were just starting to skip meals and how that hunger was almost a satisfying and a positive reinforcement there. But did you notice kind of other effects on your body in terms of your kind of your energy and your sleep and all of those areas at the time?
Not initially, but um when it started to get really bad was, so like it was essentially when I finished university, when I finished my bachelor's, and then I went into I moved to London to do a master's, and that was kind of around as well when COVID hit. So
Right.
that was when things really took a nosedive, and because there was nothing else really happening, obviously there was like, it was the worst time in the world to look for a job. So it was just, and again, like, I suppose so much of my the reason I have had the eating disorder was that seeking of control, and that was a time when everything was out of control, and this was the only thing that I could grasp to take control. So
Mm,
it was really then when I started to notice the changes. So you could say that I had been functioning/living with an eating disorder for about maybe 4 or 5 years, but it was really that kind of like 2020 mark, though it would say the 6 months from March to October, that kind of
mm.
time frame where things really took a nosedive. And yeah, I was just exercising all the time, and my sleep, like, my routine was all over the place, because I would literally spend almost every waking hour. You could probably track it down to probably 1 hour in the day when I wasn't doing some form of exercise, and, yeah, like, I would be up until 3 in the morning most mornings, like, I just wasn't sleeping properly, and the I think my body just didn't know how to regulate itself,
Mm.
um, emotionally as well, all over the place, and I mean, it makes sense because your brain, like, my body didn't have the energy to function. So, like, your brain isn't,
Yeah.
it's not giving you the right hormones you need, anything like that. And I did start to, that was as well when I started to get like a lot thinner than I am now. Um, and the in that period as well, I started to like hyper fixate on parts of my body. So it would be like, oh, I need to be able to see like this bone protruding or that bone protruding, or like I need to be able, I have a vein here. I need to be able to see that vein. Otherwise, like you make up these scenarios in your head, and it's yeah, like looking back on it, it feels like I'm telling someone else's story, you know, because it's crazy that that was where my mind was at that point. But um yeah, and I think if you live through something, it's easy to kind of, it can be easy to minimize it, but yeah, it's not until about like around like when I look back on it that I think, yeah, that wasn't an easy time, and the sort of going through all that is tough enough, but then to have your like physical body kind of just completely almost shutting down, I
Yeah.
suppose, makes it even a double whammy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a significant impact and effect on your body. And so I think I've read that the moment you really realized that something was going on was when you actually were back home with COVID. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it wasn't, to be honest with you, it wasn't like I knew I had an issue with food and exercise, and
Right.
but I wasn't prepared to admit it to myself, or to sort of
Hmm.
to deal with it, because it was also all I had.
Yeah.
Um, and I was terrified. I remember that I was literally so scared that like, who would I be if I didn't have this? Like, it became
Hmm.
my identity. I literally didn't know myself without the eating disorder. Um, but it was, and I kind of alluded to this a second ago with like my head. It was more, I started to get suicidal thoughts, and those are really scary.
Mm.
Like I really found those terrifying. And that was when I was like, okay, I need to speak to someone. Um and initially that was quite difficult. Um because, and I suppose I mean, I think like with between, you know, like it's sort of well recognized. Work needs to continue to be done, but it is well recognized, you know, that women are quite susceptible to eating disorders, and
Yeah.
there's not as big as a conversation around men. And when I went to a couple of doctors first, it was, you know, they would see some, they were kind of like, oh, you're a healthy, fit, active young
Mm.
man. Nothing really wrong with you. And I remember kind of just walking away from those appointments thinking, oh my God, like I've kind of poured out my heart and soul here, and I've been, you know, I've been just sort of turned away. But then eventually I went to a psychiatrist here in the UK, in London. And when I moved back to London in October, which was, I kind of laugh about this with my mom now as well. I'm like, I had no business how she let me on a plane, or how I even got on the plane back to London. I've no idea, but anyway, it happened, and you know, it was a good thing in the end, because I
Okay.
was a psychiatrist, and told him about what I was going through, and he diagnosed me with depression and an eating disorder, called atypical anorexia, which is basically, it's quite a common form of anorexia in men,
Right.
when essentially you don't have like the extreme low weight of anorexia,
Hmm.
but your all of your behaviors and everything you're doing is exhibiting anorexia. Um, and he also said that I have what is basically an exercise addiction. At that time, I don't know if it's different now, but at that time, exercise addiction wasn't in the kind of list, whatever list that, the formal list of mental illnesses. So he
Right.
couldn't formally diagnose me with exercise addiction, but he was saying like, you are purging through exercise. That's pretty undeniable. Um, so yeah, that's when it all kind of came to a head. And to be honest with you, I didn't actually. I remember still calling my parents, or well, my mom especially, and I actually didn't. I didn't. It's not that I didn't care, but it was like I couldn't even because some people are like, "Oh, that must have been a bombshell bit of news," but I actually was just like, "Yeah, like I have it." I It was kind of almost like I knew already, and I was
Mm.
just tired and exhausted, and I just didn't really have any kind of fight in me to keep it going or something.
No, and it's yeah, no, kind of that label is almost like, well, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's what I've been living with on a day-to-day basis. And so what happened from there? Was it counseling that helped you, or what helped get you through?
Yeah, it was antidepressants firstly.
Hmm.
That was kind of the main, because the suicidal thoughts, like, there's an element of you could do harm to yourself, so I
Yeah.
needed to get on those pretty much ASAP. Um, so they helped. And then I was on antidepressants for about a year and a half, and then it was, yeah, alongside counseling, which
Mm.
um, which really really helped. Again, in hindsight, I probably should have been in some sort of outpatient facility, but I think it was a timing thing as well. Like with COVID and everything, there
Yeah.
was a lot of things just slipped under the radar and all that. But and I still actually see my therapist, the same therapist even today. Um, and yeah, it's just been that's been the journey. And it's been getting better and better every year since 2020, but it's taken a while.
Hi, I'm Lara, co-founder, head chef at Velaforte. We believe that health and performance should never be a trade-off. Our all-natural nutrition range is nutrient-rich, gentle on your digestion, intelligently designed to support optimal training and recovery without artificial shortcuts. Now, Jen is a big fan and she would love for you to try it too. So if you're looking for a clean, natural, powerful and delicious way to fuel your training and events, use the code VF-JEN-20 to get 20% off your first order at velaforte.com.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely not something that you just click your fingers and it
No,
resolves, is it?
no.
No, and it's having, we've had a couple of female athletes on the podcast who have spoken about their eating disorders and how actually it's something that, as you touched on earlier, it's something that you still come back to and you have to kind of work through. It's not that you're cured and it goes away.
Yeah.
And so it was brilliant that you were able to get the help there, and I imagine for your family as well, knowing that it must have been, as you say, quite scary letting you go on the plane when you were at the peak of your condition, and so knowing that you were getting the support. And so it just blew my mind with your story how you'd gone through all of that and had been kind of diagnosed as with an addiction to exercise. And yet you've managed to turn it round to exercise still being part of your life, and being incredibly successful with it. How did you go from that point where exercise is a real detriment to your health and your well-being to it then beginning to turn into something new, with the world of triathlon?
I think it just had to, like, as in,
Right.
because it's one of those things where, and I'm not, that's not me trying to just like simplify it too much, but it's, or be flippant about it, but it's just like it's one of those things where, we have to exercise, and it's, so as human beings, it's kind of like you need to eat and you need to exercise. And I had to come up with a way of, right, well, I have addictions to these two things, or negative outlooks on these two things, but they're also essential to human survival,
Yeah.
so I have to interact with them. Um and I had a really negative view of, because people would still compliment me and like be like, "Oh, you're so fit," and things like that, which, they're coming from a good place. They're not,
Yeah.
and not, it's kind of like, what do you say to someone in that situation? So um I needed to reframe in my head my fitness or like my relationship with exercise, I needed to make it positive because it came from such a negative place. And I did um I did a kind of a fitness challenge in the gym that I was in London at the time to raise money for beat eating disorders, and that went quite well. And then, which are the main eating disorder charity in the UK. And then I I did that, and it was a challenge, but it felt not trying to toot my own horn, but it felt a little bit easy, like it was kind of like an endurance challenge.
Right.
I was just like, "Okay, what else can I do?" And then I decided to sign up for an Ironman. Like, the naivety of having and, like, at this point as well, by the way, I probably ran about 10K. I knew I could run a 10K, we'll say. Hadn't gotten on a bike since I was, probably about, like, 12. Hadn't swam in a pool since I was probably about 11 or 12 as well. Again, knew I could swim because I learned how to do it, but that was where that stopped. Um, so yeah, I just signed up for it, and, that was in October 2020. No, it would have been, yeah, it would have been October 2022 for October 2023's race. And, I didn't start training until I was about, um, it was probably about April of October 2023. Um, and Yeah, I remember swimming swimming a length because again, I thought I was, you think you're quite fit. And I remember swimming. I was at home on a weekend. It was Easter weekend that year, I think. And I just said, okay, I should probably go to the pool and start this swimming training. And I got into the pool and I swam a length. And I on my way back to do 2 lengths together, the panic and just like the breathlessness that I felt, I was like, "Oh my god, how am I going to do this?" 3.8 kilometers. And, yeah, but I just stuck with it and kept training, and yeah, I just sort of gradually shifted, I think, my mindset to exercise, and it was just kind of, "Oh, I need to just make this positive,"
Mhm.
because I knew that I was going to continue exercising anyway, like, yeah, so it just had to be reframed.
Yeah, and I guess the question I have is kind of, I was it that it just switched the gym addiction onto a different sport kind of addiction there? What made it different in that case?
That's a really good question because this is a question that I often ask myself or bring
Right.
bring up in therapy because I still feel like I haven't fully resolved it. Because it definitely is like, I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, I had an eating disorder and an exercise addiction. Now my exercise and eating is completely, like I've completely healed from all that, and it's completely positive. It definitely isn't. I love triathlon,
Yeah.
and I love the feeling that it gives me in competing in races and things. But I wouldn't. It is a crutch for the exercise addiction. Like, there's no deny. I can't deny that at all. And I don't. I think what happened was, in terms of that kind of switch, was I did the London Triathlon, which was Challenge London at that point. It was the last year of it being Challenge London. And, I had a panic attack in the swim, and, because I hadn't swum. My
Wow.
idea, people were like, "Have you done an open water swim?" And I was just like, "Yeah." And my idea of an open water swim at that point was doing lengths in the Parliament Hill Fields Lido. So outdoor swimming pool, which is obviously just ridiculous looking back. Um, and so, yeah, I had a panic attack in the swim, and I would say after doing that triathlon, I think that was the end of July or something. And I still had October or August, September, October, almost like 8 weeks, something like that, to go to Barcelona. I had to just, I knew that I had to respect
Mhm.
triathlon. um, that like you can actually the panic attack gave me a fright, obviously, and I realized you actually can't safely do this unless you put in the training. You know, it's not like another sport that you can just go out and give a shot.
Hmm.
Like triathlon is kind of on a different level, no matter what the distance. Like I'm not even talking about Ironman here. You know, like whether you're getting into a lake, river, or sea for 750 meters or 3.8 kilometers, you're in there and you
Mm.
need to be able to do it safely. And then you're getting onto a bike that is, you know, if you have a fall off a bike in a certain way, like that can be pretty catastrophic. So,
Yeah.
um, again, it was that kind of I have to switch now how I'm training. I can't just be exercising for the sake of exercising. I need to actually get intelligent. And
Mm.
I ended up getting a coach and he helped me quite a bit. Um and so yeah, that was kind of how the switch happened.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. And I mean, I think anybody that I've spoken to on the podcast, a lot of endurance athletes, they have all been through trauma or something has got them there. And, when you've reframed it from something that's detrimental and not healthy into something that is healthy is just incredible. And the thing that I really wanted to talk about was fueling because I know training for an Ironman, obviously you need a lot of fuel, a lot of nutrition coming in, which when you do that alongside working through an eating disorder, suddenly the thing that has been making you so unwell is then essential to getting you through a training session and a finish line. How did
Yeah.
you navigate that?
It was really tough up until relatively recently, actually. I I used to again training for the first Ironman. I used to go out for my long rides, so like I would get up, and I would literally just get on the bike and go out fasted on long rides, and that was, you know, it was looking back now, and that was just insanity. Not only for my own safety, but like for other road users and everything like that. Um, and Yeah, like so I used to find it actually very hard to sort of justify
Hmm.
that kind of you're exercising for performance rather than you're exercising to lose weight or to have a
Yeah.
smaller body, um, or to have a body that looks a certain way. And that has been a long time coming. I think the thing with me is I'm a little well, not a little bit, I am very quietly stubborn, and, like, people can tell me to do something all they want, but unless I feel the impetus to do it, that's the only way that I'll do it. So it's again, it's been one of those things that came with practice. I think the kind of biggest wake-up call was in Ironman Barcelona. On the bike, I didn't fuel enough. I wouldn't say that that was down to the eating disorder, or that was just down to being my first Ironman and not really knowing
Yeah.
enough. But when I got onto the run, um, I had this, I just had this weird idea, or just like, oh, I'll be fine with what I eat on the bike, and I don't need to eat on the run or like fuel on the run. Completely ridiculous. And I think as well when I was in, you know, when you're because this was as well like something that a conclusion that I come to when I was in the race. Like, and I think it was just when my mind was, you know, you're not thinking straight
Yeah. Yeah.
in an Ironman, and your mind is already fatigued. So my mind just went to that kind of that eating disorder place. I just sort of slipped back in there, and I was on the run, and I remembered like there was Red Bull and everything like that, and Coke and things, and I was like, I'm not touching this. I'm not drinking a full fat Coke,
Yeah.
or like I'm not drinking Red Bull. It has calories. Just absolutely like a mad thought to have when you're doing that. I mean, a mad thought to have anyway, but like, so and then halfway through the run, lo and behold, I was like, I really need to get nutrition into me, but my
Yeah.
stomach had already kind of like my stomach wasn't, I wasn't able to take anything on because you could almost feel I could almost feel my stomach shut down, like shrink inside of me. And yeah, so when I finished, I was delighted to finish my first Ironman, and it was amazing and everything like that. But there was that sort of like, oh my God, you you did not make a good decision there, Micheál. Um, and so since then, I mean, to be honest, like, and again, that wasn't, like the light bulb moment that fixed everything. There was
No.
still, like, up until even this time last year, I was doing lots of fasted training, which in the mornings, which I would not do at all. Like, I would not advocate for that at all. Um, and this year, well, since last October, I've had, my coaching has been sponsored by Optimal Endurance coaching, and my coach Brett Halliwell, he's really good. He I've kind of stopped doing that under him. Well, not kind of. I have stopped doing that under him and have been becoming a lot more intelligent with my fueling, mainly because I feel a responsibility that they have sponsored me, and I can't mess them around. If they've put like it's an amazing thing that they've done. So I'm just like, Micheál, you have to cut all of this out now. And I think as well, my head is strong enough, as in like the
Hmm.
work I've done on myself since 2020. It's been kind of like the meat, like two things coming together. I have this opportunity, and I'm also my head is in a place where I can mentally do this.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's time to really start. Like you have to be just like good with fueling.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it's just been so far it's been going well. But even yeah, like I still there are days when I'm like, oh, do I really need to take a gel with me, or do I really need to take a couple of gels on this ride or whatever. But no, I have to continuously remind myself that I have to.
Yeah, and it's where that work is. You've come so far from where you were, and it's great that you've got the strategies now to be able to talk yourself through it
Yeah,
and keep it going and say rationalizing that if I don't have this gel on this workout, it's going to impact the workout, but also
yeah,
the benefit of the sponsor as well. You've got that almost a good pressure there going, we need you to be taking this, which is possibly maybe helping your recovery to a degree.
definitely. And I think as well, like it's so much of my recovery has been the thoughts of doing something is what's terrifying or what's really
Yeah.
anxiety inducing. You know, when I take the gel, I'm like, oh my God, I'm feeling great after this. And like the world hasn't exploded. It's sort of, and that's another thing that I need to constantly kind of like talk to myself about, is that I've never regretted taking a step forward. Um, or, if someone thinks something, if someone who has the best intentions for me thinks this is going to be a step forward, not I'm not talking about just training here. I'm talking about every aspect of life.
Yeah.
Um, just give it a go and see, because I've never really regretted it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so thankful to your sponsors for
Mm.
helping kind of push you and keep you going with your
Yeah.
fueling. And I mean, it's incredible because I mean, finishing that first Ironman was an achievement in itself, but you've since gone on to do multiple Ironmans and also qualified for the Irish triathlon team. How did that come about?
Um, yeah, so I mean, once I crossed the finish line in Barcelona, I was like, I was hooked.
Yeah.
And also as well, there was, even if I wasn't hooked, I probably would have still felt compelled to do another one, because the amount of money I put into doing,
Yeah,
how
there
much
is that.
like someone in there, like I was 26, 27 at that stage. Like it's a lot of money for someone in their late 20s. So I was like, right, well, I'm not just going to put the bike up and do nothing with it from now on, or the wetsuit or anything. So yeah, I booked to do Ironman Italy, was my second one. Um, and yeah, I just got like, I just really, first of all, I think the triathlon community, like kind of going back to what my idea of sport was in my head, the triathlon community was not that I came to find.
Yeah,
Like, it's so open, not one bit intimidating. Um, Obviously, there are aspects within the sport that are intimidating, e.g.,
of course.
or swimming, and like starting to use clipless pedals, all this sort of stuff. But
Yep.
like, um, the people are so willing to help, like other
Mhm.
triathletes. I still have yet to meet someone who I'm like, I really don't like you. um, and so yeah, like I just find it such an open sport, as well. And yeah, I can't remember how I ended up. I think I just wanted to, like, the thing with me is I'm kind of, and it's something that I need to, I actually like it about my personality, but it is something I need to kind of keep in check every so often, is that I'm always sort of like, okay, but what's next? So, when I
Right.
when I finished the first Ironman, I was like, okay, I have to do a second one, what's next? And um then with getting on the Irish team, I think that was just where that came from. I was like, okay, I know now I can do it. What's the next kind of level I can go to? And yeah, I did a qualifying race, and in 2024, in summer 2024, and or yeah, it was summer 2024, and then the following year I went. So last year I went to Pamplona for the European Middle Distance Championships.
Wow.
And then this year I've qualified again. So in July, I am going to be going to Banyoles for the Middle Distance Championships again. And I didn't have a great race last year. So this year in Pamplona, so this year will be my redemption race.
Wow. Well, congratulations. To qualify for the Irish team is no easy feat there. Whilst you're still going through all the things that you've been through and having to kind of keep things in check, as you say, with nutrition and with the exercising. And it's such an inspiring story. And I really loved it because, as you said at the beginning, it is spoken about so much more in the female world and with women, and about how eating disorders can affect them, and so it's the male world which it's not really spoken about. So thank you so much for kind of speaking so openly about it. Is there something that for you stood out as the thing that helped you most through that time?
Yeah, I think there is, like I said earlier, there is still a huge amount of work to be done, um, to help women with eating disorders as well. And I'm always
Yeah.
conscious of, when I'm speaking about my experience, that I'd never want to kind of alienate women from that conversation,
No,
because
of course.
I do think it's such a huge topic within women's sport, and within just like the female population in general.
Absolutely.
But it is, I think there is an element of it almost being invisible
Mm,
within men, whether that's sport or general life as well. Like, there'd be times that I'm at the gym, or doing a very rare strength session, but or like sitting in the sauna, and you hear I hear a lot of men, like, of all ages, like I'm talking anywhere from 18 up to like, not even 18, like 16 up to like 80, talking about like cutting phases and things like this.
mm.
And I'm not saying that that's a sign that someone has an eating disorder, but it's just, yeah, I think with men there are sort of little phrases, or yeah, like little phrases, or the way that they might put things, that may be a bit indicative of something. Could be like, there may be like, it may be worth delving into their relationship with food or exercise. And I think that's more for like loved ones, or
Right.
parents, family members, or friends. It's just sort of like monitoring maybe how they're talking about food, and how they're talking about exercise, or their body. And
Mhm.
I think this kind of whole looks maxing trend stuff going on at the moment. It's it's definitely not helping. But yeah, hopefully like the people are a bit more open. And I think in terms of me giving advice to people who may be struggling, I it because it's so like one thing that I was from speaking to people about eating disorders and who've had eating disorders since I've been speaking about mine is the sort of how the like the cause for an eating disorder, the you know, we speak so much in Ironman like about the why behind your racing, but like in this respect, like the why behind an eating disorder, they can be so like the list is endless.
Mm.
But it's so interesting about like how similarly the eating disorder will manifest in people. Like, I mean, they're so like I if I shared elements of like how I would have manifested my eating disorder with someone else, it would be quite similar.
Mm.
And there are behaviors, like it's just like if you start to I think if you start to notice like different ways in how you carry yourself, if you're fixating on like what I said earlier about like certain parts of your body, like hyper fixating about, and this as well, I think there is a kind of a misconception out there that eating disorders are people like an eating disorder is a drive to lose weight. That's not
Mhm.
necessarily the case. It
Yeah.
like when I was in the midst of my eating disorder, yeah, it was to make myself as like I was making myself really thin, but I wasn't really thinking about, "Oh, I need to lose weight, I need to lose weight." It was more about a control thing, like,
Mm.
when you're in that period, you may not actually and I think that's another reason as well why someone might be like, "I don't have an eating disorder," you know, I'm not thinking about losing weight, and I think it's just sort of knowing that it can be a hyperfixation. It can be a hyperfixation on building muscle, it can be
Right.
a hyperfixation it can be a hyperfixation on losing weight, but it can also be a hyperfixation just any in general about changing your body, um and if food is somehow related to that change, then, you know, you may need to actually think about could this be an eating disorder? And like communication is so and I know people say this a lot about almost everything, but you know, just sort of like talking to someone, it's people aren't going to judge you, you know, if they're really your friend, if they're a family member, like I'm not saying that it's easy by any
No.
stretch of the imagination, but, like, people aren't going to judge you, and I think a lot of people as well, they don't really have the words to describe it, you know, like, if they're having a difficult time with food or, um, if they're having a difficult time with their body image, and I find, you know, it's kinda just like asking if like asking a question about your habits. If you find that if you catch yourself that you are turning some form of behavior into a habit, like would say with me, fasting,
Yeah.
pushing out eating during the day by hours and hours and hours. Like if I said to a friend of mine, like, oh, you know, do you do you not eat either until like 5 p.m. in the evening? Um, and they would definitely be like, no, like that's you know, like we need to have a bit of a deeper chat about this. And it's just kind of, yeah, I suppose if you find it difficult to find the words, maybe having a chat, like just asking a question about your behavior, trying to relate it to
Yeah.
them, because and again, like almost like related to Iron Man, you know how like, to me now, it feels like everyone has done an Ironman, even though it like, I'm like, "No, Micheál, that is actually still a very niche thing. Not every like, many people have not done an Ironman,
Yeah.
but that's just because it's my bubble." And if you're in that like, in when you're in that kind of eating disorder bubble, you can really it's very easy to normalize
Yeah.
behaviors that you're doing day in, day out because you're doing them day in, day out, and I think it's like to separate yourself from them a little bit and just maybe chat to someone about them. could also really help. Um, but again, like I said, that's not easy
No.
because I know that I was extremely protective over those behaviors. Um, so it is very, very tough. So just make
Yeah.
sure if you are do it with someone you feel safe with.
Yeah. Yeah, and that communication is so important, isn't it? And even if you don't necessarily have that family member or that person near you, I know that other guests we've had on have said, send me a message. And so if you link with anybody that on social media, don't be afraid to reach out because, particularly within the triathlon world, as you mentioned, it is such a supportive community and
Mhm.
helpful there.
Yeah.
And
And people I like you would be surprised with how many people relate to you. And again, that's kind of it's sad, but it is a good thing as well. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I know you mentioned about the charity in the UK, but if somebody is struggling or thinking, actually, this is resonating with me, are there places online that are available that are good places to go to that you've come across?
Yeah, so there's Beat Eating Disorders, that's BEAT, and then Eating Disorders, that's the charity who I raise money for. They're the main providers of eating disorder support in the UK. Um, and then there's Bodywise, which is an Irish charity. Um, they would be like eating disorders Irish equivalent. And then there's, places like Samaritans, they can also help. That's who I would sort of those two charities and the likes of Samaritans is who I'd recommend first and foremost. And like I said as well, like going and chatting to friends, family,
Yeah.
like they care about you, they're not going to they're not going to shut you out. And I know some people may feel like that, and I know some people, they're not in a place where they can make that happen. But I suppose one thing as well that I would love to make clear, and it's one of these things that is also quite difficult because when you're in that moment, when you're in that sort of in the eye of the storm of something like an eating disorder, it's quite hard to get through to someone because it's so tough. But it does not last forever. Like this
Mm.
is it is something that can be fixed, and it can be, like you will get out of it. But you can't get out of it alone.
No.
So that's why it's so important to speak to someone. And I mean, not to kind of scaremonger or anything like that, but eating disorders do carry the highest mortality rate of
Yeah.
any mental illness. So it's just so important that if you feel like that's the road you're going down, that you just yeah, talk to someone.
Yeah.
Um and that as well, if you feel, I know, but that statistic, it can also feel like quite hopeless, but they are treatable, but like there's no reason why anyone can't be treated for
No.
an eating disorder.
No, and you're a true shining example of that, of how it doesn't go away, as you said, it's still there, you're still working through things, but you have come through things in such
Yeah.
a positive way and have, that Irish kind of events coming up is just so inspiring.
Yeah.
So
But also as well, like, again, without, um, as a kind of like little word of hope, it doesn't go away, but it also does. And I truly believe this. I'm not trying to be trite or anything. I do think it's a superpower. Like
yeah,
when I'm in the middle of a race, and I'm like, I can't, at like kilometer 30 of the marathon in an Ironman, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, Micheál, come on. Like you went through an eating disorder for how many years? You can put up with another 40 minutes of pain or whatever, or an hour of pain, whatever you want, whatever pace you're going at. But you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
just like, and the the persistence that it takes to kind of stick to go through something like having an eating disorder,
yeah,
if you can take that after as you're being as you're being kind of treated, and carry that into another aspect of your life. It doesn't have to be a triathlon, not
No.
saying that. It can be literally anything else. Um, just for me, it happens to be triathlon.
Yeah.
That persistence pays dividends.
Yeah, absolutely. It can get you through some incredibly tough other moments in your life, knowing that you've what you've come through before. So I can definitely agree with that. So, oh, Micheál, thank you so much for your time today. I'm so thankful for you speaking out about something that isn't spoken out about enough, I don't think. So I'm so grateful for you sharing your story, and I wish you all the best for your races coming up in the summer. I can't wait to see how you get on there. But thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Jen.